You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Please, while you're driving into work, some of you who are now driving into work, please make sure you turn your air conditioner to high because I know it's hot out there. Happy summer, Matt. I know Matt is frolicking around in his Birkenstocks more than likely.
Frolicking is not a term that I do, but I do.
I've seen you frolic. I have seen you frolic.
Frolic, huh?
Yeah,
well,
it's been some
years.
years.
I've like 25 years, so the chances are highly probable that you saw me frolic at some point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you were frolicking into work one day, and then I had to halt you because of projects.
I remember that for sure. I think I was whistling, frolicking, maybe not.
Well, hopefully everybody's out there having a great time and frolicking, and pool shoes and sandals and running shoes if you can get a run in early in the morning before it gets too hot. But today in particular, Matt, what I'm really excited about is talking a little bit more about innovation around bioscience and how our industry is shifting and changing and why that is. Because I think there's this narrative that keeps happening that people keep using in marketing around sustainability, but I still think a lot of people in our industry don't really understand their science behind that. It's not a load of malarkey, as our president would like to say. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it is in the marketing, but in the actual product, if you're doing the real work, it can be very meaningful to the consumer and to our planet as well. And so I'm excited to have our friend Jason on from Evoco today. Jason is the founder and CEO of Evoco, which is I'd call it an innovation company, really. And Jason, I'll let you kind of introduce that. But that, it's one of those things where, yes, they provide materials and components to footwear companies, but I think it's much more than that. They're providing thoughtful innovations in this space. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Matt. Nice to hear you and see you. And thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So right off the bat, tell us a little bit about Evoco and what your philosophies are, your foundations are, why you started, and then we can jump into the companies you're working with and the products you guys are launching and the importance of those kind of biomaterials that you guys are bringing to market.
Well, yeah, Evoco is an innovation company. You're spot on there, and the work we're doing is manifesting itself in the footwear industry through foams and plastic based technology. But we're certainly looking at the utilization of plants versus oil to make chemistry that is used in the materials we use in our everyday lives. So stuff we obviously run on, walk on is quite crucial, but also the stuff we sleep on and drive in is made from petrochemistry. So our mantra, the stuff that we do every day from an innovation perspective, is to defossilize the material value chain across the globe and across multiple industries. However, today we're talking obviously about footwear, and I think we do that. And the idea is that we're in the market today commercially is a product that's 70 to 80% bio, high performance, highly functional, and seamlessly integrates into any brands or OEM's technology supply chain. So we can get our product out there. And we can scale our business. And when scale is when we can truly have impact to decarbonize the material value chain in this industry.
How on earth did you get into this, Jason? What's your background? Because for me, it's quite interesting to see when an outsider comes into the industry and shakes it up and provides innovation, because that's what it usually takes. It's someone on the outside looking in and then coming in and providing innovation or critical thought that really drives change. How did you get started with all this?
Well, I did come in as an outsider. I was consulting with some businesses in footwear, really around sourcing and deriving some new chemistry. And I walked into, I think it was ISPO, And I walked into the material part of ISPO, and I just saw, the nearest sustainable thing, and this is probably going on 10 years ago, was a little bit of recycling. And at that time, it was PET bottles into T-shirts, right? And, I, as an engineer, saw a challenge with that because, one, if you really look at that from a life cycle analysis perspective or a global warming potential, which is the mapping of carbon, I think some of these technologies are not as green as they are appearing to be. So I looked at this and said, you need to, in order to make change, you have to tackle the problem from the source. And the source is fossil-based raw materials being used to make chemistry and materials. And that's where the approach was. And so when we started there, it really spawned out to, how do you make functional performance-based materials from this, and how does it last? And then how does it get into the supply chain? So that was kind of 10 years in the making. But my career, 20 years kind of being in this industry, was really kind of started in climate tech, which is biofuels, biochemicals, working in the agricultural areas to kind of derive new chemistry, new fuels to kind of tackle this carbon issue. And that started some 20 years ago. So, kind of serendipitously, I ended up in this industry, but it's a major problem we need to tackle. And I feel like my engineering technical experience was right to come in here and disrupt it.
Yeah. So let's talk a bit about that, because I think when we think about our product, right, when we think about footwear, it can average 60 different materials, components. It's adhered together, stitched together. In terms of sustainability, we have real challenges with, insoles, midsoles, outsoles, especially because that's where the person is pressing down. So when it comes to, performance, I mean, it's obvious, and I think the change started happening maybe in the 80s or even before that, but plastic started being used more and more in footwear. Logically, because it was lighter and it could perform, and people didn't really consider what that meant for the earth. And now we're at a point where it's just no longer sustainable, pun intended, I guess, that, that we do that. And I guess my question to you is, when you're looking at the chemistry and the science and the performance of it, kind of dispel this notion. Because I think if people hear plants and footwear, they think naturally it's a crappy shoe that's going to fall apart. But in actuality, we see more and more really great shoes, maybe even better performing shoes with biomaterials. So maybe you can speak to that and dispel that kind of idea.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of, the issue is kind of the myths building up in the industry of bio being not as performance driven, right? And you're just using it as a tactic to market some sort of green or sustainable technology. I think what we're finding is that with the new innovations that are coming out, you have to look at functional plant-based chemistry to make materials. That is, you're utilizing plants to make polymers. You're not just using it as an additive, right? So you're not using some inert plant-based material or renewable material to add it to something to make it greener. What we're trying to really do is to create new chemistry that can add to the performance of these products. And that is the difference, I think, when you look at how we are approaching this specific industry and these specific materials, is that, we have a lab with 20 plus PhDs and engineers sitting in there working on stuff. And we have a factory in Vietnam that is taking this from lab scale and into actually manufacturing processes. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort, resource, and obviously money to do that. And so what difference with, I think, Evoco and how we're trying to approach this, and some of our colleagues in this space as well, is that you have to the foundation of this stuff is the innovation, right? Mm. And if you're innovating to make a change and to challenge a marketplace, then you have to look at multiple factors. Obviously, sustainability is our first and foremost, but then comes performance, then comes price, then comes looking into the integration of an entire supply chain that's around the globe. these sorts of things are critical when you're looking at it, but it all starts with the innovation process. So performance shouldn't be something that you lose when you look at something sustainable. It's to be something that's either enhancing or at least is at parity with the status quo.
You talked about supply chain, and we know, Andy and I know the answer to this, but I want to make sure our listeners understand. You talked about your factory being in Vietnam. Why did you select Vietnam and not China or Cambodia or India as the place in which you maintain your supply chain, your connection with the industry?
Well, we do have a partner in China, so we do have manufacturing capabilities in China. But Vietnam is Evoco's factory. It's our own factory. And we're using it as a launching ground for distribution of chemistry, but we're also using it as a launch pad to put out new innovation. So through our own factory and being able to protect IP, we can launch some innovation out of that hub. And we obviously saw the diversification of the supply chain, even leading up to COVID, around all of Southeast Asia and into other parts of the globe. So Vietnam is there to kind of get a foothold in the footwear industry, if you should say, but and to kind of be able to capture market there. But we're working with company in Italy as well to look at European domestic production. So that's happening as we speak. So we're really trying to globalize this. So Vietnam is our first factory, but we're going to be partnering with many factories around the globe. Obviously, India, Northern Africa are all these on the radar as the footwear supply chain diversifies.
Over the last couple of years, you guys have really grown in the footwear space. I know we were talking, I think it was last year, about your product in Vans. So Vans is using it, but you've got foothold in Keen and Timberland and Merrell and some other footwear brands. So maybe just quickly explain what the product is and why a lot of brands are starting to come to you guys for it.
Well, our first inception of the product was a foam. And funny enough, we were trying to tackle the automotive industry and seating, but that was quite a challenge. So, and we had some industry expertise in footwear. We had some other technology in footwear. So we went to our footwear, colleagues in the space and tested out a product, and it landed on a footbed or an insole or a drop-in, and whatever you want to describe it as, a sock liner, some people call it. And the idea there is that it was a functional product. It gave you low compression set, high rebound, some performance elements to it, and can be used as an insole in a product that requires some performance element out of that. And so it kind of started there, but the technology was obviously robust enough to become a midsole or even an outsole technology. And then that platform now moving into thermoplastics and also plant-based leather alternatives, which is basically coatings and adhesives, and utilizing plants to power that chemistry to make those materials. And so the way we engaged the market was trying to, it was funny because we were saying, well, and this is our naivety when you're approaching these things, an insole is the easiest thing to integrate into. And it kind of is, but some people don't, well, we want a bigger message. We want it to be on the outside of the shoe. We want it to be on the midsole. And can you do that? Well, we kind of made this great insole. Can we buy that first? And then we'll give you a midsole later. So there's a little bit of learning we had to do as we got into this industry and learn how to integrate into supply chains, but also work with product development and marketing and stuff to get the messaging out there. But what I can say today is that obviously the technology is growing in terms of the platform and how we're engaging the entire market in uppers, lower parts of the material and different applications that can be used in footwear. So very exciting times going ahead, but I can say that, challenge to get something that we thought would be easy as an insole into the marketplace, but it's been successful and growing. And now we're introducing an open cell PU sheet stock material to the marketplace, so it's more ubiquitously across the industry.
Is there a material, or was there an aha moment on a material that you, or and I'm not a chemist or scientist, and my father majored in organic chemistry in college and taught high school chemistry after being in the Marines. So I've been around it, but I got a C in chemistry in high school, truth be told. So
Same.
none of this may make sense, but was there a time when your PhDs were in a room like, you know what, this foundational material, this plant or this thing really has surprised us from our ability to move it into materials for footwear or some other application? Has there been kind of a aha moment or a eureka moment as you've explored all the different options that are out there within creation itself?
There was a moment. Unfortunately, I didn't have any PhDs back then. It was kind of just me fiddling with stuff in a lab that's now torn down. It was not even fit for purpose. But these things start in small places, and the aha moment was we could actually make something that felt like a foam, looked like a foam, and it was well over 80% bio content. And wow, we can do this, and we can actually. And then when you looked at our very rudimentary life cycle analysis or global warming potential back then, which was tracking the carbon, well, this can make a serious difference against what's going on out there today. So that was kind of 7 or 8 years ago, and Evoco became a formal company around 6 years ago. So if you can understand the lead up to that and how we were working, that was a moment where we could really see a path to not only commercialization, but making a difference and disrupting an industry.
I want to talk a little bit more about the performance side and how you guys look at that, because I think that's also one of the I just want to lean into that because it continues to be the myth that bio can't perform as good as plastic. And maybe explain like some of the testing that you do or how you lean into that a little bit more. And then, your products now are 70 or 80% bio-based, which is amazing. And when you look at that and where you are right now, what do you do as a company? Do you then lean more into the performance side to make sure that performance keeps sticking up, or do you keep leaning into, can we get that bio from 80 to 90%? Like, how do you do that as a business person or as the leader of the company? Where do you find that next strategic point?
Well, I'm a technical guy at heart, so we're doing everything in both of those things at the same time. Yeah. And if you ask maybe our investors or shareholders, we should probably focus on one. But no, I think the opportunity obviously is to disrupt multiple verticals, multiple product line categories within footwear. And you can do that in different ways. Some categories may want much higher bio content because that means much lower carbonization, right? And that may not be on a specific product. But, how many times have I had conversations about, can you give me a 0.15 density on a midsole that has a 65% rebound? No, that's, EVA and TPU in the existence of today. But, we are working on that as well. Now, will that be 90% bio? Probably not, but it would be probably in the 65 to 75% category. But then we're giving some functionality and again, impact through scale. Obviously, a lot of material and foam used in those things, and pretty much used in everybody has a pair of running shoes these days, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at things more from a multilateral perspective. We're not going down one specific train here because we understand the industry has different needs and different requirements. We like our technology to be pulled into the marketplace rather than pushing something out there.
Right.
And by working with the brands and testing and failing with them for sure. We had a project that failed on a midsole and it wasn't going to, we missed the season. But we have to put ourselves out there. We have to get some risk because that's what innovation is about. We learned a lot from that process. And now that we're sending in new materials, we may miss that season, but certainly we're going to be looked at for future seasons because we were transparent through that whole process, right? Mm. And so I think if we're talking to people that want to test stuff and know we're not 100% there, there's two ways we can look at it. One, we can keep trying to get there. Or two, they could start to look at their properties that they're requiring and actually see if they really need these things in order to integrate sustainability, right? So these are the conversation we've had even at the last FDRA Sustainability Summit, right?
Yep.
Where really are some of these things performance-wise, when you're using these specific strength metrics or performance metrics, are they really required for some of these technologies, right? And so these conversations need to be had all the way through, from product development all the way to C levels in the organization. What are we trying to do to integrate sustainability? At what price point? Is it about taking out incumbents and matching performance? Is it about deriving something new that's product specific on sustainability and having a whole new consider metrics attached to that, right? So it's, again, Evoco is an innovation company, so we're very diverse in how we approach these things, and we have multiple projects working with multiple very smart people, smarter people than myself, kind of focusing on these things, really driving innovation and sustainability as a criteria, or performance and sustainability as a criteria.
Sounds super holistic, Jason, because you guys are critical partners in thought leadership in the sense that as you're talking about this process that you undergo on performance with the brands that you partner with, what comes to mind is almost a coder, right? A tech coder where a CEO or a product development person or designer says, I want our website to do X, Y, and Z. They have no idea how to get to X, Y, and Z, but they rely on that coder to figure that out. And it sounds like there's a similar dynamic between you and your branded partners in the sense that they have no idea how to get on the chemistry that would create the foam or the material that would meet the performance need that they're looking for. And that's where you come in. I think it's so critically important because our brands are not going to be all super highly educated on materials development. They're going to know what they want from a stylistic and from a performance perspective. And you guys come in and provide that holistic consultation around what can be achieved now and what takes time to achieve, and maybe a proxy achievement. Okay, we can't do this, but if you try this angle or this material or this performance metric, we think we'll get there. We'll get 90% there this first time around. So I think we have a lot of brands who think they know what they want, but don't have the technical capability, as we've seen in our own surveying that Andy's conducted via shoesustainability.com. They don't have the technical expertise to get to where they want to go. And it sounds like you guys are those guys to help them do that.
Yeah, and it is a process of communication, right? And I'm not just saying that because, for the sake of saying it. It really is about a back and forth communication. Some challenges we find is that the brands are very tight-lipped about how they want to describe their current technology. Yet we know what it is because we know what's out there. We actually know how to make the other stuff that's bad as well, right? So we do that on purpose, so we know how to understand what they're doing and they're achieving. It was funny enough that we did some testing on a specific product against an incumbent technology, and there was some rebound discussions, and we showed, you need to reach these rebound limits, and we tested it side by side with the same mold and everything, and we achieved, if not better, rebound on the product. And they were like, oh, well, they were just shocked by the whole process and the amount of data we gave them to prove it, third-party verified data as well, not just internal. And I think sometimes people are not accustomed to that, right? Because they're just given something that says, this is what it says on the sheet, and this is what you're putting it in at. But when you test everything holistically with multiple types of products, you can really get a breadth of what's actually out there and what's actually happening, right? And I think we're technical people, we're technical by nature, and that's just how we approach everything. And it's a learning process for us all, including us.
And I'll reiterate, I think the transparency is key, and we talk a lot about that around like LCA data, actually understanding footprints, and then targeting that when you actually understand what's happening. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who are making guesses or who are making claims and can't back it up. And so even at the front end, the transparency is so important as to what the footprint actually is, like what the performance actually is, what it can do. And again, we had a huge conversation about LCA last year at the Sustainability Summit. The upcoming Sustainability Summit, September 19th in Portland, Oregon, where we're doing it all over again. And the conversations will dive even deeper into the bio discussion. and dispel myths and talk about cost and performance and change management around all those different things. And Evoco will be, on a panel that discusses that. Along with what I'm really excited about is we've got a farmer coming who's doing regenerative farming, and so I know regenerative is like this big new buzzword everybody's doing. And I didn't really buy into it until I went out to this guy's farm and saw what it was. And it's amazing. It's super impressive. It makes complete sense from a cost and a yield perspective for a farmer. And what, so I think when, people need to sign up and attend to hear more of these discussions and talk about that. And Jason, too, I was talking to someone the other day about the performance metrics. We've got stuff where like, the old model is like 8 years. They're testing the 8 years for like some of these running shoes, and it's ridiculous. Runners, if you're an actual runner, you get what, 3-4 months, something like that. And if you are a walker or a casual person, you get maybe 3 years. And we know that because we have the data. It's actually in our consumer survey of what is durable to you, and nothing exceeds 3 years. Nothing. So why would you test to 8 years? And this is the problem and if you're listening out there, you should look at that, because if you're actually testing the 8 years to make product for 8 years, you're actually doing more damage to the planet to have more plastic in your product to last that long, which it doesn't need to be at all. So I think we as an industry have to look at why are the numbers there? Is 15 years ago some chemist or some technical person came up with those for a completely different product. And I have the same problem around old data on LCAs. Everybody keeps using the same MIT study from 2010 when shoes were completely different. Yeah. The data has to be more current. It has to be more accurate. At the minimum, it's misleading. At the most, it is greenwashing, because you have to do like for like in this. And I think that's where Evoco's really a leader in this, is because they're leaning in and actually saying, here's the data. We've tested all this stuff out. You can look at it. We can explain it to you. There's nothing to hide. And if you're working with someone and they don't have the data, then maybe you shouldn't be working with those people.
Right. We have a product in the market that's been in the market, sold, millions of units of these products that have been in the market being used over and over. In fact, I'm wearing a pair of Vans today that I've had for, probably going on 12 months now. And they're pretty good, pretty pristine. I have another pair that I use for the gardening, and these are the ones I wear for work. But anyways, and they work and they function, and our product's in there, and the outsole still attached to the upper, and all these kind of things, right? So that's critical. But touching on the LCA subject, one of the things we decided to do, which some companies asked for and some companies haven't, is we're actually putting our number for a specific product on the Higg Index. And we're putting a stake in the ground to say this number, it's a pretty good number relative. We can improve upon this, but it's completely transparent. I mean, third-party review, then third-party critically reviewed, and then critically reviewed by the Higg Index people that sit behind the computer that we saw them on, right? So all this kind of stuff was happening. Therefore, our assumptions are accurate. They're not affected. Our assumptions are not so drastic you can swing your global warming potential by 50%. It's our assumptions were assessed. It's a number that we feel very comfortable with. It's 3.5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent to give you like a 75% bio-based product. We think that's 3 to even 10 times less than some other equivalent products that are on the marketplace that are made from oil. And so this is quite important in the path to transparency, right? And, we're not saying use the Higg Index to index it. We're saying use the number that was qualified by all these other people to kind of prove that what we're doing is truly transparently sustainable. And then to add to that, our number can get better if we add the biogenic cycle in there, which means the nature of the plant to absorb carbon in its lifetime and recirculate and that circularity of carbon is through photosynthesis, right? And so there's impacts like that. There's also impacts on what you meant, regenerative farming. So I grew up, or I was born in Woodstock, Ontario, and where my dad still lives there. His house is surrounded by farmland. And, in Ontario, they already use some regenerative farming practices, which is crop rotation and other things like that, and reduction of pesticides and all these kind of things, right? But you can go these extra steps further to kind of ensure that the ag products you are utilizing as a chemistry will have even less impact going forward as more of these practices are used and stuff like that. So kind of topping this whole thing off is transparency is key, because if people want to use that number, they can realize that, one, the number that you've put on an index is there and is marketable at that point. Two, we can promise them through the innovation practices and also looking at a variety of different feedstocks and raw materials and new chemistries that we can reduce that number or add performance based on that number, right? So we can really look at this thing, again, holistically, that word, to really kind of disrupt this industry and actually start making change and impact. Because today it's very, I'm going to say, be a little bit controversial. It's very superficial at this stage. It's not indoctrinated enough in these companies to really adopt technology such as ours and find a way to adopt it, because we can be very competitive on pricing, especially against our colleagues in the space that are also doing bio-based, but we can be very competitive on that. But oil spent 60, 70 years developing a supply chain that has been cheapened and dirtied itself up. And then you talked about performance of having 8 years in a shoe. Well, that's by adding pretty toxic chemicals into that to make that thing last so it doesn't degrade at all, right? So it's completely hydrophobic, it repels water, and obviously when it goes to landfill, it'll sit there and then leach out that toxicity over time, right? So all these things need to be kind of considered as we move forward. And how do we do it? How do we integrate technologies? How do we work together? How do we communicate? All these things are critically important, but I think transparency is a start, and that's why we went on the Higg Index.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think that's the other thing too, is like, you have to stick to the standards. I know there's some people out there who play around with numbers and move things around, but you've got to stick to apples, and you can't just make up your own numbers and your own metrics and standards and things like that aren't fully adopted, because it doesn't. You could do it internally, I think, from an operations standpoint, if you're trying to figure out how to be better. But when you start marketing that to consumers, that's very misleading. And I think that's, as an industry, as an area, and I know a lot of brands don't want to do that, but this is a new space, and it is very difficult for people to understand how they can talk about their progress without making huge claims that are inaccurate. But this is something, again, that we're going to be discussing at the Sustainability Summit September in Portland, Oregon. Again, Evoco is a big sponsor of that and supporter. And Jason Robinson, we really appreciate you coming on today and talking a little bit about your background and what you guys are doing around this is specific. It's not just green chemistry, it's plant-based chemistry. So I think that's the key point, is there's a lot of chemistry out there wants to be green. Even the Rubber or Plastic Association in the U.S. renamed themselves, shockingly, to something else so they wouldn't get tied to the toxicity stuff that we deal with. So even that, but plant-based is key. And I think when we talk about bio, that's what we need to lean into and discuss more, is plant-based bio to that. So Jason, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the conversation and love what you guys are doing. Really appreciate everything you're doing for the space. Obviously, not just on the sustainability space, but the space in general. And love what you guys are doing. Really excited for the summit. Telling everybody who's listening, please come out to that. It's going to be a great show. And we're going to talk a lot of good stuff over there.
Thanks,
awesome.
Jason.
And folks, you can Google it. It's EVOCO, Evoco. You can Google it and go to their website and see all the different products that they have. And I would get in touch. I always tell people, don't call at the last minute trying to integrate something. Like, take a look at this. I mean, we're talking 70, 80% bio content, same performance, meaningful to to the product that you're making, meaningful to the customer buying it too. So go take a look. And again, if you're at the summit, they'll, Evoco will have a booth and you can talk more with Jason and the team there. But as always, folks, we enjoy bringing these shows and talking to our guests. We always learn something and hope you do too. Shoeandshow.com is the website with our full catalog. You can go back there. And as always, next week, new episode drops on Monday. Tell a friend, tell your mom, pass it around, let them know. Shoe and Show is here, trying to bring the noise, as always. And until next time, Shoe and is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.